Did the UFC ruin Conor's career? Now, on the surface, this seems like a crazy statement to make. Because, let me just say this right now. Conor McGregor is the reason Dana White privilege is even in existence. He was the person who brought it to the table that a fighter can get such crazy preferential treatment that it's so unbelievably obvious that even the fighters have a name for it. But what gave me the idea to make this video is Conor made a very interesting statement last night at this boxing match he was at. And it got me thinking. But before I read you the statement, please consider a like, comment, subscribe. If you've already subscribed, hit the bell icon. Helps me in the algorithm. And let's get into this. So, what he said to a reporter that was there is, and I quote, "No one in the history of the fight game has ever been treated the way that I've been getting treated at this minute." McGregor continued, "Through what I came through to what I bring, they fucking should open the floodgates for me. I'm waiting, I'm still waiting. My patience is wearing thin." Now, let me first say this. The reason that you are waiting, Conor, is because, bro, you were juicing. It is the worst kept secret in MMA that Conor McGregor, to recover from his leg injury, he took substances that are illegal under USADA. Even Dana White confirms that under extenuating circumstances, a fighter isn't going to be tested. They pulled that. Something that was never brought up before, but when Conor breaks his leg, all of a sudden we're going to use that little clause in the USADA pool. And I believe the biggest reason why USADA is no longer going to be a part of the UFC going forward is because of Conor McGregor. USADA even referenced Conor McGregor as being one of the main issues they've had with the UFC. With Conor McGregor is obviously juicing, it makes us look bad as a drug testing company to let him come back. So, let me make this clear. Conor, you are waiting because you took a substance that is illegal under USADA. Whether that's, I don't know what he was taking, but I mean, let's be real. Bro's on something. But that got me thinking. The UFC has fumbled some opportunities with Conor McGregor, and it's not what you think it is. Because Conor, up till he became that superstar, was really one of the most active fighters you could see. That's one thing Conor doesn't get enough credit for because we haven't seen it lately. I mean, if he comes back, we're on, I believe, our third McGregor comeback. So we've forgotten just how active Conor was. Let me read you off Tapology. So, from the Jose Aldo KO, he wanted to make a 3-month turnaround to fight Rafael Dos Anjos. That didn't materialize, so they give him a short notice opponent in Nate Diaz. He loses this fight. We all remember this, but I think people don't realize just how close together this was. That was 3 months from the Jose Aldo fight. From the Nate Diaz loss, he wanted to fight him 4 months later. They ended up having to reschedule it 1 month after that. And that's how Conor McGregor won Nate Diaz 2. That was 5 months after the first Nate Diaz fight. Let me keep going. Eddie Alvarez. Eddie Alvarez was only 3 months after the second Nate Diaz fight. That's crazy how close together the Jose Aldo fight and the Eddie Alvarez fight. He was extremely active. And then this is where we get into the first issue. He fights Floyd Mayweather. I think that was the great problem with Conor McGregor. Honestly, I think it would be a completely different career for Conor if he never fought Floyd. Because what that does is now, from Eddie Alvarez, which took place in November 12th of 2016, his next MMA fight is 2018 versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. That is the worst comeback opponent you could ever have. And the point that I'm trying to come to as we have the Khabib Nurmagomedov fight. Next fight he has is in 2020. They didn't utilize their biggest star for one whole year. There was no boxing match. And he wins against Donald Cerrone. And then Dustin Poirier, both losses. But from the Donald Cerrone fight to the second Dustin Poirier fight, the one that he lost by KO, that was 1 year. Almost 1 year exactly. The point I'm trying to make here is Conor is not somebody that does well if you keep him waiting. He reminds me a lot of Volkanovski in that way. Volkanovski is borderline too active for his own good, and I think that's going to be a problem with him fighting Ilia Topuria. And it makes sense. 35-year-olds, I believe, welterweight and below, only have 2 wins in title fights, and both of those are Tyron Woodley. So Conor wants to remain active, but the UFC, I think, is concerned with making a money fight, making profit off a Conor McGregor fight. There's a lot of resources that go into Conor McGregor. I don't think anybody is going to deny that. You have to build a card around Conor. When O'Malley was coming up, O'Malley was on, I believe, every single McGregor card, counting Dustin Poirier and Dustin Poirier 2. He might have even been on the Donald Cerrone card, but don't quote me on that. Because they put stars that they want to build up on the same card as other stars. That's one reason O'Malley was able to get star power off of Conor, even though they never actually fought each other. But the fans that enjoy O'Malley watched him because he was on the same card as Conor. The point I'm making is the UFC has to build cards around Conor, and Conor's just concerned with fighting. In his prime, we're looking at, from Chad Mendes to Jose Aldo. Chad Mendes was a short notice replacement. We are talking 5 months. That is ridiculously active for a star. Like, O'Malley is not as active as Conor was. I would argue Conor, in his prime, we're talking like the activity level of somebody like an Israel Adesanya title run, or even like a Sean Strickland. Granted, I think Strickland's a little bit more active. I think the UFC fumbled Conor McGregor and messed up his career in the way of they were more concerned with turning a profit in cards, making money fights, money cards on the same card as Conor, and building cards around him than giving him fights, fight after fight after fight. And I think they learned from that when they go to somebody like Israel Adesanya. Israel Adesanya's greatest attribute was he was incredibly active as a champion. If we gave the activity level to Conor McGregor when he had the lightweight belt, I think it would have been a different career. I think we would have had a Tony Ferguson versus Conor McGregor. Now, do I think his career would have turned out wildly different? That's hard to say. I'm not saying that the reason that Conor lost to Khabib was because of inactivity. No. Stylistically, I think Khabib would have won either way, but I think ring rust is most definitely a thing. And anybody who says it isn't, apply ring rust, that concept, to literally any other sport. If somebody is a professional football player and they don't play football for a whole year and all of a sudden you throw them into the world championship, they're not going to do well. So I don't understand why there's a debate in MMA over, is ring rust a real thing? I think some people are affected by it, and some people aren't really affected by it. Volkanovski needs to stay active, or we're going to have a problem. Conor McGregor, I believe, is in that same camp. Conor McGregor is like, if you look at him, even like how he acts outside of the caves, he's almost like ADHD brain. Bro needs to be, he needs something to do. Like the erratic spending that he has, I think that's part of that issue. I think once you get the adrenaline highs of Conor McGregor, you constantly need that. And I think part of this quote isn't just him talking about him not being able to come back during this long time off. That is mostly his fault. But I think part of it is the frustration that the UFC has fumbled giving Conor McGregor fights. They didn't give him a whole fight all of 2019. Before he became champion, he was fighting every 5 months. Sometimes he was fighting every 3 months. When you have somebody that can bring pay-per-views like Conor McGregor, you need to keep them active. And I think the UFC learned from that, and that's why they're doing it with other stars that came up after him. Now, do I think the UFC straight up ruined his career? No. I do believe the UFC has fumbled a lot of opportunities with Conor. And I think that's a big reason why a lot of the dream fights that we wish we had at lightweight just haven't materialized. I will say this. Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier, I believe those fights would be very different if they kept Conor active after the Donald Cerrone fight. If you gave Conor an opponent in between Donald Cerrone and Dustin Poirier, I think those fights would have been different because that's a whole year in between, and I think somebody like Conor needs constant stimuli in fighting to keep a hot streak. I think somebody like Conor would benefit greatly from a tune-up fight. Honestly, when I hear like hypothetical matchups like Conor McGregor versus like Paddy Pimblett, and then we can throw him against Chandler, honestly, that's not the worst idea in the world. I just don't believe it's going to happen for a lot of reasons. But somebody like Conor is somebody that would benefit greatly from a tune-up fight, so we can just get that ring rust off and then give him an opponent like a Michael Chandler. I do believe Conor, if Conor beats anybody inside of the top 5 of lightweight, it's going to be Michael Chandler, but I do believe Chandler will win. Unless Chandler is somebody that also doesn't do well when he's inactive. That's why that fight is as interesting as it is. Because if Conor can beat Michael Chandler, you cannot afford not to keep him active. I think if the UFC gets the chance again, I think you could see Conor McGregor, if he's able to beat Michael Chandler, he's fighting again in 2024 in December or before that. Because they need to make that return on investment with Conor. And I think if that does happen, you're going to get crazy fights in 2024. But there you go. That's my thoughts on Conor McGregor, whether the UFC ruined or fumbled his career. Tell me what you think in the comment section below. I just saw what Conor McGregor said last night, and I thought it was an interesting concept. If you enjoyed this video, please consider a like, comment, share, and if you're already subscribed, please consider hitting the bell icon. It really helps me in the algorithm, keeps you updated. And with that out of the way, adios.